Hello, and welcome to episode 30 of TBR, the To Be Read podcast, where we talk about the books we love and topics that interest us. I'm Patrick Stemp, and with me, as always, are Michael Ronn and Jamie Maltman. How you guys doing?
Great. How are you, Patrick?
Excellent. Happy New Year, first of all, in case I forget to say it later.
Happy New Year, everyone.
So tonight we're going to be talking about the books that we're looking forward to reading in 2015. And as usual, first of all, we'll go through over what we've been reading over the last week. And Jamie, do you want to go first?
Sure. So I finished The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman and loved it. Thought it was a great little book, and it's just there's so much that there's so many different emotions that he touched on in that book. Like I think you read it as well, right, Patrick?
Yeah.
No?
Yeah, I've read it.
It's like because it's creepy and eerie at times. It's like delightful, whimsical at times. It's quite some pretty like emotional, like for a child, and really emotional stuff. And sort of, oh my gosh, I can't believe that's happening in his life kind of stuff is there, as well as all the wondrous things. Like it's just such a wonderful combination. And I always love his tone, and I just pretty much can't get enough of Neil Gaiman. And I just might mention that later on when we're talking about things for 2015. So I finished that, and
so I should say that's one that would be a fantastic Tim Burton movie, like an animated.
Yeah,
I bet it would.
Totally work that way. Did you read it too, Michael, or not yet?
No, I've heard of it, so I know.
Yeah, it's
the basics
really
of it.
And it's not a long read. It was like I don't know, 200 and something, or 180 pages or something like that. So it's really quick. That was the one I was surprised when I picked it up at the library because it was shorter than I was thinking it was going to be. So that was a really good one. And so then I was. I looked down at the physical books because I've got a few physical. I've got this little bin by my bed where I keep a lot of books for my son there to read to him. But we've got there's one that I hadn't read in a while, and there was an event and talking about self-publishing. I wasn't a part of it, but it was at a Markham's, the next city over from me in Richmond Hill, and there was an author who I saw it promoted through some other just local group stuff that I'm a part of, and I didn't end up going to that event because I was busy that day, but I connected with the author and we ended up meeting for coffee. And I just, we exchanged books as just something to look at. And I was initially I was like, okay, well, he sounded interested in reading my book. It wasn't going to be a review exchange. It was more just, let's read each other's stuff and see if we can help each other out in the future. And so I like the cover of his book. So this is his book. His name's Pico Gaskovsky, and the book's called The Affair Box, and it's got a nice Michelangelo sculpture on the front. But it's completely not my type of book that I would think I would read. So it's it's more literary. It's about people having affairs. It's not something I'm really interested in reading about at all. But I thought, you know what? It's been sitting here for a while. He did get a chance to read my book. I'm like, I'll give it a chance and just see what I think. And I started reading it 3 nights ago, and I read like 70 pages the first night and like 70 pages the second night and finished it last night like really late. It kept me up late reading each night. It gripped me right away, almost like, because it is all about affairs, but it's from it's like the psychology of it. Like some of the people involved are actually psychologists, so they're psychoanalyzing themselves about what's going on and the feelings they're having, and it's multi-layered. It's not just one guy having an affair. He's having this sort of an affair, almost, but mentally is there, and it's all the beating himself up and the shame and the stuff, and then his wife's having an affair after that, and it goes much deeper, and it's her perspective. Like it actually switches to her perspective for a while. So there's all the stuff with the hiding it and this and that, and like just all the emotional stuff that's going on with them. It's really gripping and really awful. It felt like a train wreck, like watching a train wreck, or even like I was just telling a friend about this. It felt like almost like a horror movie where you're watching and you're like, no, don't go there, don't do that. No, oh no, what's gonna happen?
Yelling at
and
the
all
screen.
This bad stuff. Like I really felt like that as you're going through it, but there was different layers too of like what happens if one person's having multiple affairs, and and then the spouse that's sort of willfully ignorant / ignoring / bitter / having all like there's all these different aspects to it. So it was and there's some wonderful language in there. It was a really, really good book. I really enjoyed reading it a lot, and it gives you sort of all the not that I'd ever be thinking about it or looking to do the stuff, but like it makes you almost think of like the logistics and all the stuff involved with it is so stressful and so horrible, and so like to just keep things going, and I don't know, it made me think and like analyze in a whole bunch of different ways and that I normally wouldn't. So good job on that, and I thought it was a good book, and I would actually recommend it. And the other one we continued on is, I'll show the hardcover one that we got there, is been continuing to read to my son, so we're about there. So just past, I think we're halfway or 2/3 of the way through The Great Cow Race, so book
Awesome.
2. So really enjoying that. It's a lot of fun, and he's enjoying it too. So it's funny. It's funny when
Jeff
he's
Smith's
like,
Bone, for anybody who's listening.
yeah, Jeff Smith's Bone. That's right. And every time hearts show up on the screen, he's like, oh, like it's totally the Princess Bride, the Fred Savage, right? Like his reaction every time, he's like, is this the mushy stuff? Like totally, he's exactly like that with no prompting. It's so funny to watch as a 5.
Yeah.
So, a lot of fun. So really fun.
I love the end of the Great Cow Race. That was pretty funny.
Yes, he really enjoyed that too. Yeah. The actual race. He loved.
Yeah, the actual race was hilarious.
Very, very good. Cool. I think that's actually where we finished last night. So there you go. So that's my fun week in holiday reading.
Good. How about you, Michael?
Yeah, I actually read a few books this week. I read a few books every week, but I read a few more than I normally do. But I will talk about a few of them. You got to pull up my Goodreads page because my memory in that kind of sucks. Okay, so I read. This is actually a reread. Archie and Mahitable by Don Marquis. It's like pseudo newspaper column poetry. So Don Marquis was a newspaper columnist back in the 1920s, and he wrote this column every week called Archie and Mahitable, and it was these free verse poems written by a cockroach who was trapped in his office, and at night he came out and typed on a typewriter and left these messages for him to publish in the newspaper when he got to the office the next day. And it's hilarious. Like it follows his adventures with these cats, or with a cat named Mahitable, and all these different types of insects that have all these really cool personalities. And it's really it's funny at first, but it really evolves into like a social commentary of everything that was happening in the 1920s through the eyes of this cockroach, through these zany poems. I mean, the cockroach Archie can't use the caps on the typewriter because that requires 2 keys. Mm-hmm. So all of his poems, there's like no stops. They're run-on sentences. There's no caps. It's really like a frantic stream of consciousness style of reading, and it's just really funny. Totally something that I would read, but I read it a few years ago and just felt like reading it again. It's a lot of fun and a lot of laughs. And another book I read, because I read a few, I read The Miracle Morning, The Not-So-Obvious Secret Guaranteed to Transform Your Life by Hal Elrod. Have you guys heard of that?
I haven't.
Okay, he was on the Smart Passive Income podcast with Pat Flynn this past week, and I listened to him and I really liked his story. He was this guy that he was a salesman and he was making a lot of money and got into a really horrible car accident. Basically broke like 11 bones in his body and was dead for like 6 minutes. I mean, just awful. And he came back from that as a motivational speaker and just had a really awesome story. So it's like, oh, I'll check the guy's book out. It was in Kindle Unlimited. So
is he the Miracle Man? Like that guy?
He does The Miracle Morning.
Okay.
So
I remember there was a Miracle Man that I've seen on some different things. I was just wondering if it's the same guy.
No, it's a different guy.
Kind of disaster accident story. So.
Well, his idea of A Miracle Morning basically is, basically the whole premise of the book is be insanely productive, get everything you need to get done by 8 a.m. So he preaches this idea of, you get up at 5 in the morning, you do some meditation, you do some visualization, imagining what you want your life to be, you read for a little bit, you do a daily journal, express gratitude, that sort of thing. And it's just the act of it. It's like a productive workflow that helps you have a really good day, because if you do it before 8 a.m., it's kind of like the Mark Twain phrase. If you eat a frog by noon or by breakfast, that's the worst thing you'll do all day. So it's kind of based on that premise. And I'll say the writing was really good. I didn't care too much for the message. I thought it was a lot of fluff. I skipped kind of halfway through the book, and that's when it really started to get a little better. But that is something I'd recommend. And if anything, listen to the podcast. It's free, and if you're in Kindle Unlimited, then you can get it as well. But that was pretty good. And yeah, I read another book, but I can't remember what it was because it's not on my Goodreads. My Goodreads kind of went nuts. Oh, and I finished the Bone series. Duh, that's what I was going to talk about. I finished the Bone series, so I won't say anything about that because you're reading it, Jamie. But
Thank you.
I sent you an email, Patrick, about
Yeah, I got it.
how I felt about that ending. So yeah, that's my reading week.
We'll wait and see what when Jamie finishes it, and then we all will have read it. Of course, I haven't read it in years.
Yeah.
So I had to flip through the ninth book, just trying to refamiliarize myself with the ending. But by the time you get to that night, there's so much going on by that time that just kind of flipping through it, I couldn't pick up enough to sort of remember why you might feel the way you did about the ending.
Well, it's so cool because it's so layered. I mean, it's just such great storytelling. I mean, it's crazy how in depth and deep that book gets after nine books. It's kind of insane. And I read the prequel, Rose.
Right.
And then I read the Bone Tall Tales, and those weren't as good. I mean, they were decent, but they didn't really add that much to the main canon, I didn't think. So,
okay.
That's my week. What about you, Patrick?
Well, let's see. I finished reading Kick by John L. Monk. And Jamie, are you reading that one now as well, I think?
Not yet. I'll get to it sometime soon.
So I finished reading that, and I thoroughly enjoyed it, enough that I immediately went on Amazon and downloaded the second book, Fool's Ride, which I'm reading right now. So in Kick, it's about a guy who committed suicide when he was in college, and since then has been bouncing around into other people's bodies. He kind of, when he's not inside of a body, he lives in a place that he calls, I think I'm forgetting exactly what he calls it, but basically like the Great Nowhere. And every so often a portal will open and he finds himself inside the body of usually very bad people, and he has to figure out what they've done. He typically seems to want to find a way to, while he's in their bodies for about 3 weeks. After about 3 weeks, the original host kicks him out. So in that time, he tries to arrange things that by the time he's gone, they will be, held accountable for the terrible things they've done. And it doesn't always go as planned. It's pretty brutal stuff. It's, not bloody, gory kind of way, but there's lots of, biker gangs and all this kind of stuff, and bodies in freezers, and so you won't want to read that one to your kids. But and Fool's Ride then is the one that I'm reading now. Picks up pretty much just after Kick ends, and I'm enjoying it. It's continues on the story. It's weird. I was considering that the main character is sort of this. He's just kind of tethered to the earth through whatever body he's inhabiting at the time. You would think that there maybe wouldn't be too much tension involved in the story because it's like, if something happens to him, whatever, he just ends up back in the Great Nowhere and he waits for another portal. But John does a really good job of creating that tension in other ways. So it's not always about what might happen to him. He's also trying to, say, protect somebody else if he gets kicked out too soon, or if things don't, terrible things will happen to maybe another character. Or, if he's put in a position where he's, say, tied down or something, the other people in the story could potentially keep him alive for 3 weeks and just torture the heck out of him during that time, and that he would have to endure, So there's still a lot of tension in the story, and I'm really enjoying the series. Let's see. I also my reading this week was a little bit of because after Christmas I had so many books that I was sort of reading 10 things at once, and so I was reading a chapter of this, a chapter of that, and so I kind of had to put half of them away, and I've been focusing mostly on other than Fool's Ride, As You Wish by Carrie Elways. I can't remember the subheading for the book, but it's basically inconceivable tales from the making of The Princess Bride, and I'm about halfway through that, and it's fantastic. If you're a fan of the movie, to hear some of the behind-the-scenes stories, for example, we all know Andre the Giant was a big dude, but they really go into just how big this guy was. There's a story about him. He could put away like 12 bottles of wine, and one night on the way out of the hotel, he just kind of passed out in the lobby on the carpet on the way out the door, and the guy weighed 500 pounds, so they couldn't move him. So they just put the velvet ropes around Andre while he kind of passed out there, and he got up the next morning and wandered out. And just it's also fascinating to read about just how much went into the fencing in the movie, just how much training Mandy Patinkin and Carrie Elwes had to go through, the guys that they sort of had come onto the set, and they it sounds like literally they had like a couple weeks of intensive training, and then they did all the fencing scenes at the very end so that they would have more time to practice, because they didn't want to use stunt doubles if they could help it, and every spare second, if they weren't actively filming a scene, they were off to the side, practicing their moves. So it's a really good read. I'm enjoying it a lot. And the other one I was focusing on then is the Walking Dead Compendium 1, which is the first 48 issues of the comic book. And I'm 2 or 3 chapters in. It's a little hard to tell. They haven't broken this compendium up into issues. Like they've removed the covers, which is actually a little unfortunate. I kind of would have liked to have had those.
Mileposts, right? Like it's.
Yeah, so they've broken it into chapters, but it's kind of hard to tell where one issue ends and where another one starts.
Right.
So one chapter could be 3 issues. It could be, I figure I'm probably about 8 or 10 issues in. Have you guys watched the show or read the comic?
I read the first issue of the comics, and then some knucklehead destroyed book 2, so I can't read book 2. Yeah, I've read the first issue of the comics.
Okay.
I enjoyed it.
So for anyone who's who's watched the show but not read the comics necessarily, they follow pretty closely along actually. But they're at Herschel's farm is where I am, for anybody who has watched the show and knows where that happens. And that's it. That's my reading for the week. So we'll move on to the reading that we're looking forward to next year. Who wants to go first?
Oh, I can dive in if you want me to.
Sure.
And I'm just looking at this, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna sketch down, get down some notes to get ready for this, and that list is already big. I'm like, oh man, and this is I imagine how many, or I know how many books I picked up along the way this year, right? Like, there's, probably 2/3 of the books I had no clue that I would ever read this year, at least, at the start of 2014. So who knows how accurate some of this will be? But I guess my one thing I want to do is, and I think I did quite a bit of this at the latter part of this year, but I want to try and do 1 or 2 indie books for every traditional published book. Sort of keep it like that. And I was even just thinking to myself, my wife's like, just make sure you don't ever get sick of reading indie books. Like if you ever have a bad experience, go and just in case I do, right? If I ever have a bad experience reading something, then go to something I know I'm gonna love right afterwards. So it's just like I dive back into it. So I've got those lists of maybe I'll pick up another Neil Gaiman at that point, right? But I guess maybe to start there, I was just looking through some of the other Neil Gaiman books in the library, and I think I'm just gonna as I go along, every periodically, maybe every 5th book, every 8th book, whatever. Once in a while. I'm not going to have an exact system like you used to have there, Michael, but I definitely want to read more of the Sandman comics. I've got some of them on order from the library too to continue with that, as well as some of his other books. There's some of the other fantasy authors that I do like. I want to go back to this year, so I want to read more Patrick Rothfuss, probably maybe later in the year. I want to read more Brent Weeks, who I haven't mentioned here, but his what's it called? There's the Broken Eye. I can't remember exactly the series, but I'm going to get into that at some point. And there's some Dark Prism series or something like that. I read his Night Angel trilogy. Wait, is Night Angel Garrett's books or no? What's the name of his one?
That's Nightblade.
Nightblade. Okay, I always get that confused because it's a similar sort of name. But his Night Angel trilogy I read, which I really liked the previous year, like 2013. Definitely want to. There's some more of the Sean and Johnny, or Sean and Dave, Sean Platt and Johnny B. Truant, and David W. Right? Is it W? Yeah. But so continue with Yesterday's Gone. I started into season 2. Going to read more there. I haven't read The Beam, but I've been wanting to read that for a while. It's another one on my list. The one that I read, that The Power of Six by Nicholas Rossi, so I want to read his other Perseus, sort of, I think it was like sci-fi, maybe a bit space opera-ish almost one, but with a bit of mythological and philosophical stuff entering in there somehow. Some of the ones that you guys have mentioned, like Patrick, you read the first A.G. Riddle book, the Atlantis Gene, or you mentioned that before, or no? Okay. Someone else did that, I thought.
I might have mentioned it.
Did you read the first one?
I haven't. I started it, but I never got.
Well, I know Nick Thacker, who co-hosts the Self-Publishing Answers podcast with Kevin Tumlinson. He wrote a book in that world when it was opened up for Kindle Worlds, I guess. So maybe that's what you're remembering, is maybe Kevin was talking about that.
I did listen to his interview with Simon Whistler on Rocking Self-Publishing. And I just, from the sounds of it and sort of the research that he did and the fact that it sounds like, it's not like Da Vinci Code in terms of anything like that, but it's more the way that it reaches back into some historical stuff and brings it into sort of plausible scenario stuff. The way that he does that, there's a lot, and it's going into like ancient history, like prehistory even, of humanity and stuff, along with this present, sci-fi sort of storyline, and there's a bunch of stuff like that. So just that sounded really neat. It's something I want to get to, and it's done very well. Kick, you mentioned, is on my list there. There's another one that I picked up, I know, a few months ago, Malarat. That's, or I can't remember if that's the first one, but it's a series. It's another historical fantasy series. That's by Jessica Rydell. So there's just, I keep adding to it. I'm like, there's more and more and more, and then even a few more. But like, when I get the stomach back to dive back in for more George R.R. Martin book 3, that's definitely going to be there. And I still have only read the very first story of Wool. So it doesn't even get really, that's almost like the prequel, really, in the way that it's set up, and I know that.
By Hugh
Howie. I got my
Howey.
signed copy.
For anyone who's listening, that's Hugh Howey.
Yeah, Hugh Howey, Wool. So, I'm gonna continue plugging away, and I think when I checked back, I read 51 books for myself, plus a few. Like I added a few of the ones with my son this year, like in terms of some of the better comic ones. And
so did I not manage to get The Martian on your to be read list?
That's another one I was thinking about. And another one that I saw it was on sale the other day, and I almost bought it, but then I was like, I'm not going to read it anytime soon. And it's like I checked, and the library has the ebook on Overdrive of Anne Leckie's Ancillary Justice, which was like Hugo, Nebula, both. I don't know, whatever. It was like an award-winning debut, I think, too, right? So
yeah, honestly, I read the first.
You read the first one?
No, I read the first chapter and a half and gave up.
Didn't grab you, eh?
No.
So okay, well, we'll see. And I'm glad I'm gonna take it to the library. Try that.
Yeah, it's the it was I think it was probably a combination. I can't speak too much about the book because obviously I didn't read very much of it, but I think it was a combination of the mood I was in at the time and the type of storytelling. And I just wasn't enjoying it and didn't feel like continuing with it. But let me know if it's.
Sure, I will do. Yeah. I'll check that out at some point. And then the one other one I just thought of too is I want to continue reading Lindsay Buroker's Emperor's Edge series, which I do have, and my wife's actually several books ahead of me in that one. But I'd like to read more. So there's what's that? Probably like the first 20 books for the year plus that's only. That Carrie Elwes one, man, you're selling me on that too.
That does sound pretty good.
Yeah, and Jim Butcher, I want to get to at some point because, man, like not just the Dresden Files ones, which I've heard so many people raving about, but his Codex Alera series, which is like a fantasy set in a Roman Empire-ish type world, which is right in my wheelhouse of what I write. So it's something I'm very, very interested in. I want to get to that at some point too. So, man, I keep adding. Keep adding, and then I'll add more next week that probably get in the way. So there's my growing to be read list, but I'll see how it goes with that, like 2-to-1 or 1-to-1 sort of a thing.
Okay, how about you, Michael?
Yeah, my list isn't quite as extensive as yours, Jamie.
Sorry.
That's okay. I like to try to fly by up the seat of my pants these days. I just kind of drift and whatever sounds interesting I read, and at the end of the year. I have a lot of interesting stuff that's on my to-read list, or read list. But some of the things that I'm looking forward to reading are the Wonder Book, because you guys have read it, and I'm always the last person to read something.
Well,
so
I haven't read it yet.
Yeah, oh, you haven't? Okay, well,
So
you're reading it. You'll be done with it by the time
it
I
came
get
in the
it.
mail today, so there
Yeah,
it is.
gotta get that book. That looks awesome.
But it's not the type of book you blast through either. It's the type where you read a little bit and then you get inspired to go write something. So you'll go slowly, or you should, I think.
Yeah,
Just flipping through it, it looks amazing.
Yeah, it's so beautiful.
That's definitely one that's probably at the top of my list. And then Kick by John L. Monk. Just haven't had time to get around to that yet. A new book in the Mouse Guard series is coming out, I think, in January. Legend of the Black Axe, which I think is a prequel to the Mouse Guard series, which I'm probably going to pick the print version up of that right away, just because I love the first two Mouse Guard books. So I'm definitely a huge fan. I think he only releases one of those books a year, so I'll read that. And I also look forward to finishing the Deadland series by Rachel Ochs. The first book was 100 Days in Deadland. She released the second book in the series this spring, and I don't think she's released the third book yet, which is why I haven't read the second book. But I think that's either due out. It's got to be due out really soon, probably beginning of the year or by mid-year. So I look forward to just digging into those. Maybe she'll do a box set just so I can get all of them on my Kindle, because I just like to read series when they're done. It's just kind of my thing. Yeah, there's just so much. I mean, it's just crazy. I definitely want to read more books by Steve Scott. He's got a ton of them out, and the ones that I read this year, there's all of them that I read I liked. The Daily Email Marketing Blueprint was pretty good. So anything that he writes really is pretty good stuff. I mean, he's starting to have his fame, and he's making the podcast rounds these days. But his books are really quite good, and I think there's a lot that I could probably learn from those. And then I guess they're going to finish Yesterday's Gone. Sean and Johnny are going to finish Yesterday's Gone this year, or not Sean and Johnny, Dave and John. Yeah. Sean and Dave, yeah, I'm not remembering that. You guys know I know. Okay, yeah. So Sean and Dave. So I think they're supposed to finish Yesterday's Gone.
So you'll start it.
Yeah, once they finish it, I hope they release a box set. I'll just grab it all at once, and then I'll plow through it. I've been looking forward to reading that one probably more than anything else that they've written. It's really interesting. I guess I hate committing to series before they're done, so I look forward to that. Trying to think of other stuff. I mean, there's all kinds of nonfiction that I want to read. About productivity, and there's the book Smart Cuts. If you guys have heard of that, it's kind of I think it studies the lives of several people, like big-time entrepreneurs, and how they kind of use smart decisions in order to hack their growth. So I've been hearing a lot of people talk about that one, so that's probably the one I'll read. And then I'm probably just going to read a lot more poetry this year. I didn't read that much poetry this year, and it's kind of one of those things where I've got a library that's got a pretty good selection, and I really do think that indie poetry is going to it's going to come here in the next couple of years. It may not be in 2015, but 2016, 2017, I think it's going to hit. And I just want to be more well-read with my poetry, because it is something that I'll probably continue writing. So, yeah, I mean, nothing in particular. I just like to take a journey, and whatever I find, I take that and I go down a bunch of rabbit holes and just see where I end up. It's like the equivalent of getting drunk and blacking out and see where you wake up.
In a pile of books.
Exactly. You wake up in some strange place, and it's actually pretty cool. That's me. What about you, Patrick?
Well, I kind of start my my list by looking at. I start with Goodreads, actually, and one of the things they have I like is the most read authors link that you can kind of follow on your account, and so I start there and start going through my most read authors to see if any of my favorites have something new coming out, and that's the first one. I don't know if you guys have heard of this book, The Rook by Daniel O'Malley. I know I've mentioned it, but probably not for a long time. So this is a book from 2012. This is one of the things that I hate about, like you said, Michael, it's hard to get into a series before done. And I think one of the reasons is, like, this book came out in 2012, and I read it and then asked for it for Christmas last year, and I hadn't read it yet because probably about at least a year ago, if not more, it was announced that the sequel was going to come out, and it's called Stiletto, and that's coming out. Oh God, it may not be coming out until like mid-year or something, but it's definitely on my list, and it has been for a while. I'm really looking forward to it. I just hate the long wait. I'm probably going to have to reread The Rook, which I don't mind. It was fantastic, and that's one about. It starts with a woman who wakes up in a field with no memory and a bunch of bodies lying on the ground around her, and a letter written to herself from herself before she lost her memory, explaining who she is and a little bit of what's going on. And so the story, it turns out that she's a member of a secret British organization that kind of protects the people from supernatural, demons and all kinds of terrible otherworldly things. So I'll probably reread that in preparation for Stiletto. And the other one that made my list was James S.A. Corey's fifth book in the Expanse series is coming out. The first one, and this is called Nemesis Games. No idea where they're going to go with this. I don't think either of you have read any of the books in that series. It starts with Leviathan's Wake, and then there's, I'm never going to remember all of them, but Caliban's War. So there's 4 books in the series before this one. I can't wait for this. I was just happy after the third one to discover that there was a fourth, and the fourth really did kind of leave it wide open, that it was pretty clear there was going to be a fifth book. I'm just happy that it's coming out pretty close to a year after the other one, so none of this 2 or 3 year waiting for the next one.
Mm-hmm.
I've got Jack White's The Guardian on my early 2015 list. That's the third book in his historical fiction series about William Wallace. I'm going to read the Redwall series by Brian Jacques. I downloaded the first one, and I haven't started reading. Well, I've read like the first chapter just to get started on it. That's one of those books where I said I had like 10 things going on at once and had to put a couple aside. So I'm going to read that. I'll read the Vlad Teltos series by Stephen Brust. I got the first 3 in paperback, so I'm going to get through those. And I don't think he's done writing that. I think he said it's a 19-book series, if I'm not mistaken, and I believe there's probably only 15 out right now. I could be mistaken.
Only. Okay.
Only, that's it.
Only 15 books.
And then the big one for me, I've got to finish reading Don Quixote. I've got to finish that in 20. I started that book like a year and a half ago, probably, and I just set it aside, and I just need to start. I just need to pick it back up. Just a chapter a day, and
Plow
get it.
through it.
Yeah, not because it's bad or anything. It's an amazing translation.
Yeah.
It's let me grab it here. Without pulling my headphones out. Edith Grossman. It's her translation.
That's the one I read. Yeah, that's the best one.
It's fantastic. So it's nothing against her or Don Quixote, the story itself. It's just, it is what it is. It's very old. And it keeps getting put aside for other things. I got to get that done because the other 2 books I have on my shelf that I've been wanting to get to and haven't because of this one is the Iliad and the Odyssey. And
Both good.
Yeah, and I read the Odyssey years ago, so I want to go back. I want to read the Iliad and then the Odyssey, but I can't start either of those while I've got Don Quixote sitting there.
Yeah, yeah, it's good. It just takes a long time. I've actually read it twice. I read the Edith Grossman translation, and then I read it in Spanish back when I was in college, and it takes a long time to get through. It really does, but it's worth it.
Yeah, and it's nothing. It is not at all what I expected.
Yeah, it's not. Like most people, when they think of Don Quixote, they think of the windmills, because that's the most famous scene. But it gets pretty deep philosophically, He goes on some crazy adventures.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there. So it's good. It's really good. It's keeps getting put aside. I don't know. That's kind of my main list. Like you, Michael, things will come along and push other things down on my to-be-read list while other things leap to the top. I know I'll be waiting for Kevin Tomlinson's next book in the Sawyer Jackson series, but I don't know when that's going to come out because he, in the meantime, has started a new. I don't know if it's going to be a series or a standalone. If you've seen this Evergreen,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and that just
February.
yeah. So the idea behind that one sounds pretty cool. I'm interested
I
to see
agree.
what. Yeah. Jamie, are you aware of that one?
I've seen his stuff about it. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's about a guy who it sounds like he can touch somebody and for 30 minutes has access to all of their memories and skills and everything. And I'm a little hazy on the how exactly it works, but I guess there's some stuff going on there where if he touches the same person too many times, their personality can kind of become permanently overlaid on his, and so there's some interesting rules and stuff that he's laid into that. So I'll be interested to see what that series looks like. Yeah, tons and tons of books.
Yeah, not enough time or hours in the day to read them all.
And so that kind of reminds me then next week we'll be, I almost said next year, but I guess both apply in this case. We're going to be talking about how we're using Goodreads today and some of the things that we think how we might be able to use it better in 2015. And that's one of the things, the reason I was thinking of that too is because I noticed I got a notification today that Michael Ronn had added 69 books to his...
Really? Is that many?
It was something like that. It was crazy. It was like 60 or 70 books that you either... it may have been you were moving stuff around. I don't know. But
Yeah.
You just get in the mood and you start. You start
I went on a
adding, and
spree.
yeah.
Every 10 days I go into Goodreads and I just go through
Spree.
lists, and click, click,
yeah,
click.
I'm in Goodreads every single day, adding something to read or moving, something that I've finished, and it's a fantastic tool. And so yeah, we'll talk about it a little bit more next week. So is there any last minute things you guys want to talk about before we close?
I actually got because John L. Monk, that we've mentioned a couple of times, was listening live, and he just he fired me off a message saying he liked the Brent Weeks Night Angel trilogy that I mentioned. That was the reason why I want to read his other books, his Lightbringer books. He said he liked the first book, but he's got to continue that series, and that actually got me to look at it at Goodreads. And I just realized there's at least 4 books in that series, and only 3 exist so far. So that means it might go down my list a little bit for now, via the Michael exception there.
Yeah.
But just looking at his name there, I found out that he's got there's Night Angel 0 and Night Angel 0.5, and there's some stuff with 1.1 and 1.2. I'm like, I gotta figure out what the heck all that means, but it sounds like there's a few novellas in that same world, so I think I'll add them onto my list instead.
I saw a book on Goodreads today. It was I don't remember what it was called, but it was the weirdest thing I've ever seen. I've never seen this before. It was title of the book, had some angel on the cover. Title of the book, and it was John Doe number 1, semicolon, Jane Doe number 11.
Okay.
I've never seen that before. It was the weirdest thing. It's like in 2 concurrent series.
It's a Marvel crossover.
Yeah, exactly.
No, actually, speaking of that, I just saw that there's The Way of Shadows. It's like the graphic novel version of the Night Angel series, so it might be something you might check it, because that's a really cool series. It's got magic-wielding assassins that are really, really interesting, and lots of crazy stuff happens, so I liked it.
Cool. Okay, and
John's,
thanks for...
John's watching. He says hi, everybody.
Yeah, hi, John. Thanks for tuning in.
Yeah.
So we're good? Close it out?
Awesome.
Okay, so for those of you listening, either now or later, we'd love to hear from you. If you can send us an email at tbrpodcast@gmail.com if you have a question or if you'd like to suggest a topic for the podcast. If you're an avid reader yourself and would like to talk about joining us for an episode to talk about books, just let us know. You can also subscribe on YouTube and iTunes, and if you'd like to leave a rating or review, that would just be fantastic. And you can also visit us on our Goodreads page, which should be linked in the description for the show. And as I mentioned before, next week we're going to talk about how we're using Goodreads now and our plans for using it in the future. So have yourself a great week and a good new year. Night, guys.
Happy reading, everybody.
Happy reading. Happy 2015.